Hi, this is Catherine Morgan. I'm the founder of the Depression Discussions, and this is the conversation that entrepreneurs need to have. And anybody who's working and struggling with depression, I hope that this helps. Today, my guest is David Murray. David Murray and I were at a few events together, although I don't think we actually met at those events, but we have mutual acquaintances. And when they heard that I was doing these interviews, they're like, oh my gosh, you have to talk to David Murray. So I'm talking to David Murray. Hi, David.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. I know that you had a experience of, a deep episode of depression. Can you share a little bit about what that was like and what happened?
Sure. So this would have been about the middle of March this year. And prior to that, now that I think about it, just really in a bad space. My depression, I've lived with depression my entire life. And it's kind of ebb and flow, and it's gotten worse as I've gotten older. And in the last couple of years, I experienced some real dips. But leading up to March, I just continued to spiral down and continued to just find myself in a space where I didn't care where I was, didn't care who I was with. Didn't feel like anyone cared about me, didn't feel loved by anyone, and not in a poor me kind of situation, just really felt kicked to the side.
Isolated, alone.
Yeah, isolated, yep, that's the best way to put it. Isolated, alone, and eventually it got to a point where I really didn't want to be around anyone or be here any longer. And so around the middle of March, I made an attempt on my life and took an overdose of my prescription drugs. And it obviously didn't work, but that's the lowest I've ever been. I've never attempted before. That was the first time. And it was ended up being in the hospital for about 2 weeks and being on medical leave for close to 2.5 months to get everything all sorted out and situated again.
Right. That's, from somebody who's been in that place, outsiders say, oh, that's such a selfish act. I don't hear any selfishness in that. I don't think people really understand unless they've been in that headspace. What would you say to people who, sort of throw that energy at it?
Yeah, it's hard for seek first understand, right? And so anyone outside of depression or mental illness, it's got to be really difficult to really understand what the person is going through. Personally, you're in pain. I was in pain. I was hurting. I didn't want to hurt anymore. I didn't like how I felt. I didn't like this feeling of suffocating, this isolation, just like drowning myself in this isolation, and I just didn't want that anymore. So it wasn't a selfish act by any means. It was an escape from that pain and from that hurting. And from the outside, I can understand why something like that does look selfish, because the person may have everything going for them, or it may appear that they have everything going for them, or they're in a good place, or they're hurting people with their selfish act. But that simply isn't the case. It's really about alleviating the pain.
What I hear is almost, it feels like self-preservation in a way. To be is too painful, and to escape that pain is almost supporting yourself, or in our bad headspace, that's what it can feel like.
Yeah, and with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, I remember feeling pretty numb about everything, and it just didn't matter. It didn't matter if I was going to take my life, because I wasn't going to feel anything, and I wasn't feeling anything now. So what's the point of being around when all you do is you feel this numbness, this really suffocating numbness? and you just don't want to feel that anymore. And knowing you are going to hurt some people, but in the back of my mind, I do remember thinking that I was doing my family and my loved ones and my wife a favor, that I wouldn't be around. I wouldn't be a burden anymore.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. I think that that's the part that people who haven't been through that dark night of the soul don't get.
right,
Part of you is already gone. So you're just taking the other part, and part of you feels like it would be a relief to the people around you to not have, care and concern, or any kind of burden you may have been, whether you actually were or not. Like, that rational evaluation of the situation is gone.
right. That's exactly it. That's
And I
exactly
think
it.
that people do not understand that depression often doesn't exhibit or feel like sadness. When I know I'm really in depression, what I feel is flat. It's when I have a flattened affect, and none of the things that usually bring me joy. In our conversation before, you mentioned something about not, all the things that usually spark you were not
Yeah,
sparking you. Like, for me, it's music or art or my writing or my clients or something. And when I'm flat, when I can't get an emotional bounce back from something, that's when I know I'm going into a really bad headspace. It's not crying, it's not sadness for me.
right. Yeah, and that's the tricky thing about this illness is it's different for everyone, and there isn't really like symptoms kind of like the common cold. You sneeze, you cough, you blow your nose, you have a cold. Depression, some people do end up in crying spells, and that's all they can do. They can't get out of bed and they can't function. I was pushing my way through the days. I was still able to go to work. I was still able to function, but I was faking it the entire time. And I don't ever remember feeling sad, but I do remember feeling, as we talked about, isolated and numb. And so if you're not displaying traditional behaviors that people may associate with people being depressed, it
Right.
can be very confusing to understand what that person is going through.
Exactly. And the example that everybody's using these days, and to the point, the reason I started the depression discussions was Anthony Bourdain. If
Mm-hmm.
anybody on the surface had a dream life, or the life that I'd be like, oh my gosh, it was him. And that's the reason I'm like, this has to come out of the closet. We have to talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that was definitely a shock. And, I'll be honest, I didn't follow him that closely, but you're right. He definitely seemed to have everything that people would dream about having, and had the picturesque life that people would envy for. So, yeah, it's a shock and it's sad. And, we can only hopefully build awareness from it and move forward.
So I'm glad we didn't lose you. Would you be willing to share a little bit about your journey back to feeling better and re-engaging with your work and your family and your life?
Sure, absolutely. So after I attempted, my wife noticed something wasn't right, called 911, and I ended up at the hospital for about 2 weeks. And, looking back on that, I was pretty numb to what was going on. Still I would say, still in a space of just not caring and not wanting to be around. I felt even more deflated that I didn't succeed in taking my life. So I was battling that. And in the hospital, they started trying new medications, and it seemed to work, and it seemed to not work. It's you see the doctor for 15 minutes, and that's all the time you get. And besides that, you're doing sessions with therapists, but other than that, you're left alone to your own devices. So, I don't know if it's such a place one can get healthier. It was volunteer, so I was able to leave after some time.
Right.
I do remember coming home and not feeling right. Just feeling, I don't know how to explain it other than just kind of stiff, almost kind of like a robot. And I was on suicide watch. So I had a therapist prior to going to the hospital.
Right.
Went to see him, and he put me on medical leave and said that I needed to stay with my parents because I was on suicide watch. So stayed with them and ended up going to outpatient centers just to really try to get the mind focused on something rather than just sitting around and not doing anything. Um, it should have been a real dark time, but when I think about it, and when I look back at it, I definitely remember not feeling happy about the whole situation, but strangely, I remember also feeling calm being around my parents. My wife, bless her heart, would have to drive to work and then drive to my parents for the night and then leave my parents to go to work the next day. It was, she was going back and forth, and this ended up like almost a month where my therapist was trying new medications and trying to get me to a place where I could function. And eventually we got to a place where I started feeling, I wouldn't say normal, but where I just kind of felt a little antsy, like not doing anything was starting to get a little boring.
Right.
And I started yearning to do the things that I used to do, go to the movies, play board games with my friends, spend time with my wife, leave my parents, love them, but leave my parents and get back to my own apartment.
Right.
And even consider going back to work and resuming, quote unquote, a normal life. But that period of time seemed to stretch forever. It just took a long time to get to a place where I could stand on my own 2 feet and actually function normally, if that even exists these days. So yeah, it was definitely a long haul, and I couldn't have done it without the support of my family and my friends and my wife. I got a bunch of cards from my family and family friends wishing me the best. My sister didn't tell my nephews what was going on, but did say I was in the hospital. So my nephews brought me some cards, and
Aw.
yeah, it was really cute. I'm very lucky and very fortunate to have a supporting network who has also learned what this disease does and becomes, as I've learned what it does and become. Because I do remember being in the hospital and being surrounded by people who don't have support. And this disease, I wasn't healthy to begin with, but this disease would just cripple these people who don't have a network, don't have support, don't have people they can go to. And to be quite honest, that was probably the most terrifying thing about being in the hospital.
I don't doubt it. And actually, the first interview I did was with a licensed psychotherapist. And one of the things he stressed that one of the ways you can help in depression is connection, which is kind of the last thing that you want to do when you're feeling depressed, is to reach out. But that was also a question that I got from someone in our community. How can you make yourself reach out when you're in a state and you actually don't want to, but you know you should? And conversely, how would you like your friends and family to reach out to you if they see that you're not in a good space?
Yeah, that's a tricky thing. I remember having episodes where, again, going to the isolation, and I would push people away. I would push my wife away. I would push my loved ones away. And, obviously that they would be hurt by that. And I wouldn't care, which sounds like a horrible thing to say, but I just didn't care. So I never was in a place to ask. As I've learned what this disease is and this illness is and some of the warning signs, I've learned that it's not a good thing to push people away. So I'll talk to my wife and say, hey, I don't think I'm in a good place right now, or I'm kind of feeling a little down. And also, my friends and family, as I've opened up about this, they've been sensitive to quote unquote the warning signs. And so they've reached out. They've been proactive about asking how I'm doing and if I'm doing okay and being there for me. And that has helped me reciprocate that, reach out and communicate and share. So I think, when you're in the middle of this illness, it's a scary place and you don't feel like you can reach out.
Right.
And I'm very fortunate to kind of have gone through the very bad part of this disease, come through and learn some coping mechanisms, some cognitive behavior that allows me to reach out. But there isn't a manual for this, and I can understand why people don't when they're suffering from their depression. It's not easy to do, but I would just encourage you to just talk to anyone. It could be a stranger. Just talk to someone. Reach out to your family. Don't push them away. Do your best to reach out.
Yeah, and our friend Phil Gerbishak said that when you're feeling good, reach out to people. Reach out to people who might be having a bad day. As a matter of fact, I was having a bad day earlier, and he left me the nicest love note voicemail, telling me how much he values me and my friendship, and that I'm awesome. And
Right.
today sucked, but he loves me.
Yeah, that's good things. It's good to have that. I also have to give a shout out to my coworkers and my the place of business that I work at. They've been incredibly supportive of this mental illness and supportive of me getting better and supportive of me coming back to the fold of the work. And I also know that is not always experienced either. So I have to give kudos to everyone at work in my place of business that they gave me the space to get better and understood what I was going through, or at least attempted to provide that opportunity to get better. So that is something that I won't ever forget.
That's beautiful, and it's very heartwarming. But the common themes that I'm hearing in what you're saying is communication on both sides, and a little education and a little awareness, and exactly what I'm trying to do with these conversations, taking it out of the closet so that you didn't feel terrible talking about it. I mean, you've been open and generous and gave people a way to interact with you, which I think helped you have a better result, as opposed to if you were like, it was really bad oral surgery that I got an infection. I mean, you could have made something up.
Sure.
You were on medical leave, right?
Right.
You didn't have to tell your story. You didn't have to open up. But you opening up gave people the ability to meet you and to support you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great observation. And looking back at that, again, I don't think that would have been possible had I not gone through the episodes I've gone through. The more episodes I've gone through, the more I've learned about this disease, and the more I've learned how to communicate about it and share. So it's maybe that's the positive thing about this whole thing. So
yeah. Yep. We all struggle. We all struggle. Some's visible, some's not visible. Thank you so much for sharing your story so honestly and so openly. I know that you're going to help somebody who really needed to hear this.
hopefully.
And the fact that you're here and your energy is open and warm, and you're back and you're working and you're with your wife and you still love your family, like, people can come back.
Yeah, absolutely they can. Yeah, it's hard to think about where I was back in March, because it just seems so I don't know what the word is. It just seems so out of place. So it must be a sign that I'm doing somewhat better.
I'm sure you're doing somewhat better. I'm sure. Anyway, as long as but it doesn't matter what I think, it matters what you think. And the fact that you're here and you just came back from work and we're talking about this on a video chat is a pretty good sign.
I think so too.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Hi, this is Catherine. Thank you for watching this interview of the Depression Discussions, the conversations entrepreneurs need to have. If you want to see more interviews, you can go to depressiondiscussions.com, or please join the conversation on Facebook at Depression Discussions. This is a labor of love for me, bringing this conversation out into the open and out of the closet. My other labor of love is my company, Point A to Point B Transitions, where I help entrepreneurs decide if they want to go into corporate jobs or fix their solo consulting businesses so that they work with clients that they like and make the kind of money they want to make without exhausting themselves and hating their business. If this sounds like you can schedule a 45-minute one-on-one complimentary consultation with me, and I'll help you figure out your right next step. This is Catherine Morgan from Point A to Point B Transitions and the Depression Discussions. Thank you.